What's up, everybody? Friday, Q&A time. Quickly, let's get through these sponsors that allow me to make this podcast and offer it to all of you. This episode is brought to you by Christensen Arms, the original creators of the carbon fiber rifle barrel. They are the makers of the lightest and most accurate rifles in the industry. I have one of their 308s. I have a 300 Win Mag, actually two versions of that. One of them is an MPR, Modern Precision Rifle. The other one is a Ridgeline, which is on a more traditional buttstock, not as modular. The MPR is very modular and adjustable. And they also sent me an MPP, Modern Precision Pistol. 300 blackout. Throw a silencer co suppressor on that thing, and it is still ridiculously small. I love the carbon fiber technology. If you want to check it out, just check out ChristensenArms.com. If you don't know a lot about firearms, Christensen Arms is doing everything they can to try to make it easy for you. So they have created a Find My Firearm tool. You can find it very easily on their website, ChristensenArms.com, or you could go to ChristensenArms.com/FindMyFirearm if you'd like to go to it directly. It'll work you through your desired end state, your desired utilization, and point you toward some things that, or some suggestions, I should say, that may help you along in your firearm journey. Can't recommend them enough. ChristensenArms.com. This episode is also brought to you by Onnit, the single longest standing podcast sponsor that I have. Onnit.com/hot. If you have a few minutes, go to that website and check it out. If you're into, and only if you're into, total human optimization. If you're not into that, then, I don't know, go somewhere else. If you are into that, you'll know you're in the right place because the podcast artwork is right there front and center, and it'll say Cleared Hot Special. Receive up to 10% off when you check out. And I'm going to let you just dig in. At the very top row, supplements, nutrition, fitness, apparel, sale, items, plus more. Like new releases, digital stuff like books as well. And then there's content. Maybe you're into spoken word. Maybe you like the visual medium. Maybe you like both. I don't know. Go to the contact tab and check it out. I would say, in my opinion, they're probably best known for their Alpha Brain product, which is right there front and center looking at you. It's a nootropic that helps you with memory, focus, and processing speed. I very often get asked whether or not A, I take this, and B, it helps. The answer to both of those questions is yes, I do find a difference. I don't take it every day because when I do take it, I want it to work, and I'm not a fan of taking something every single day, the little receptor downgrade phenomenon. So I take it when I need it. And there's also on that front page a protein, Power Food Active. There's some fitness equipment. There's Total Gut Health. And like I said, if you got time, go to the website and check it out. Onnit.com/hot. And that's it. What else? Oh, well, I don't know if it'll be up by the time everybody's listening to this, but the Cleared Hot blend of Black Rifle coffee should be available Friday at some point during the day. And if you just go to, just go to my Instagram page and click on the link. I think it's shop.clearedhotpodcast.com, but I might have just sent you to a Chinese warehouse that's going to make you cookingware that'll give you cancer. So maybe just go over to my IG, and if you're interested in coffee, awesome, check it out. If you're not interested in coffee, then don't fucking check it out. All right, that's how that works. Let's get into this. Full Auto Friday, number 65. Here we go.
Okay, I got the red smoke. Okay, copy. West of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now.
Come on with it, baby. Give it to me. I need it. You're cleared hot.
Copy, cleared hot.
Ladies and gentlemen, you guys have questions. I have answers. Is that correct? Is that a factually correct statement? I have my opinion. That's what I have. I don't actually have the answers to any of life's questions. I have my experiences that are, I would like to say they're unique. They're not. A lot of people have shared them. But I have, my 43 laps around the sun with those experiences. And if you have questions and you send them to me, I'll do my best to answer. Is it the end-all, be-all? It's not the end-all, be-all. But it is my opinion. That's what I have. I have my opinions. So let's get into this. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these. Who knows how long I'm going to go for? I'm not even going to say I'm going to try to keep it short because I do that every time and then I run my mouth. So question number 1. Andy, love your content. My question is, what is the appropriate age to explain to your kids about the dangers of the world, i.e. stranger danger, without making them afraid of everything? I tried to teach my young kids to be thankful for food by showing them video of emaciated kids, and it obviously freaked them out. I want them to remain carefree, but also have self-awareness. Just not sure how to go about it. FYI, kids are around 6 years old. Thanks for all that you do. I love this question, and I get versions of this often, so I've taken the opportunity to provide for you my opinion. And my opinion is that there is often a fine line between preparation and paranoia. I highly recommend the former, and I don't really recommend the latter. I'm not sure of anything positive that necessarily comes directly from paranoia, other than burnout, but I also don't think that's positive. So when it comes to ages for your kids, today is actually my middle son's 16th birthday. This is Thursday. This comes out tomorrow, so by the time you guys hear this, it'll be the 6th. 16 years old. My youngest is now 13, and my oldest will be 18 in October. And I bring that up because 3 different kids, 3 vastly different experiences with each of those children. And I think any parent would probably agree with that. There are no 2 kids that are alike, especially when it comes to processing and the ability to understand complex or maybe complicated subject matters like preparation versus paranoia. 6 years old, I mean, I think back on my own children. The stranger danger conversation is a great one, especially when they start going to public school or they're going to places where you may not directly be with them. You know, their little wings are spreading just a touch and they're getting some time away from mom and dad. And you want to have that conversation. You want to make sure that, hey, you only leave with people that you know. And I think my family, we created a code word. I forget what it was. It's probably snuffleupagus or something like that. You know, something that they could send another adult, perhaps that you didn't directly realize as a child, but they could say a phrase that only your family would know, and you would know that it would be okay. 6 years old, though. What can you teach a 6-year-old? Well, you could show them a video of emaciated kids, and it's going to have the result that it did with your kids, which I think is kind of awesome. This is a great teaching point for you, the parent. And it shows that at that level, at 6 years old, depending on the kid, it may be a little bit too much for them to process. But what I would say is, as a parent, the strategy that I adopted, and I still try to adopt, is I try to pay attention for teachable moments as we are just navigating through our life. As an example, I just took my son out to lunch for his birthday. As we were leaving, this might be a shock to some people, but as we were leaving, there are homeless people who are here where I live in Kalispell, Montana. And there was somebody who was panhandling on the side of the road, and my son made the comment, you know, how does somebody end up in that situation? Now, again, obviously he just turned 16, so he has a deeper and higher level of processing. So we had a really interesting conversation about choices, and that the choices that you make in your life are going to determine the course of your life and largely the outcome and where you end up, and whether that be around responsibility or integrity, discipline, setting goals for yourself, substance abuse, addiction. We talked about all of these things for the last 10 minutes of the car ride, all based on the fact that he made a comment about something that he was presented with in real life right in front of him, and I used it as a teachable moment. Now, my kids are obviously older than yours, and at this point in their life, I have found that the most successful approach is to kind of knock on the door with ideas and allow them to open the door and then step through the threshold. The least effective thing that I've been able to do with my kids at this age is say, this is the way it is, this is how you are going to do it, and provide no explanation whatsoever. It's so much more powerful when they come to the conclusions on their own. I have very open and frank conversations with my kids about substances, about sex, about their social circle, responsibility, education, employment, all of those things. I disagree with some of their opinions, and I disagree with some of the approaches that are being taken. But what I don't say to them is, hey, you're a fucking idiot and you need to do it this way. What I try to do are provide options or alternatives and consistently and constantly knock on that door. And then the best thing that I try to do, in addition to that, is set the example that is commensurate with the options that I am providing. If I tell kids, hey, you need to be responsible and you need to be disciplined, I need to show that to them. Otherwise, what I say is going to be meaningless. And I just realized I'm totally rambling and has nothing to do with your question. So, teachable moments. One of the things that I have found that worked great with my kids when it came to teachable moments and explaining to them about the dangers of the world One, like I already mentioned, is being aware of those moments that you see. And wherever you may live, there are going to be opportunities for you to highlight situations that are better or worse than your own. The homeless population or an experience with a panhandler may be one. But, maybe a better way to make your kids a little bit more thankful for their food and how much choice they may have and the luxury that it is to be able to go into a pantry or go into a refrigerator whenever you want to and get whatever that you want, is I would take them down and volunteer at a place where they are providing food for those who are less fortunate than yourself. And there will be conversations that come from that. And what I would say is don't try to make it a huge issue. I would say give them the opportunity, even at that age of 6 years old, to give back to the community, to serve something bigger than themselves, and allow the conversation to come from that, maybe on the ride to the location or the ride home from the location. And you can use that as a teachable moment and discuss, pretty much every single topic in that particular instance. I mean, I'm not necessarily talking, I don't know what they call it in this modern era. Soup kitchen is the term that I grew up around for sure. I don't know if that's still accurate. But you want to talk about a juxtaposition between, people who are in a position where they're kind of, I would say, struggling or probably not in a place where they want to be, going there intentionally with the intent of helping and serving those people creates an amazing opportunity to have those conversations, which will provide that thankfulness and perspective. The dangers of the world, stranger danger. I think that is one that can be reinforced pretty constantly. The way I used to do that, instead of making it a conversation all of the time and talking about it at random intervals, I would bring it up in the moments right before I was about to drop my kids off. Like, hey, have a great time, be safe, and just avoid anybody that you don't know. And if at any time you feel uncomfortable, go find your coach, go find a parent, go find a friend, parent, all of those things. It was kind of what I would leave them with as they went out the door. And I think the biggest thing that you can do when it comes to preparing your kids for the danger of the world is to teach them how to think critically and objectively. Teach them how to think for themselves, and teach them how to solve their own problems, as opposed to waiting to be told what the problem is and then what the solution is. Teach them how to use their eyes, their ears, in that ratio, their mouth, problem solve. And I think that's the best. That's probably the best that you can do. And as your kids get older, you can have more complex conversations. What I would say is at the age of 6, maybe focus on allowing them to be a little bit more carefree, because you're the adult who has that higher level of self-awareness. So keep them under that umbrella and try to keep them in that bubble and just let them enjoy that portion of their life, because as you know, as their parent, that bubble is going to pop at some point. You're going to need that self-awareness, and you really can't be that carefree in the modern world, even though I don't actually think you could be carefree in any era of human civilization. But right now, they don't need to be overwhelmed. They don't need to be bombarded. So as they get older, escalate a little bit, but pick the point in time that will have the most impact. For me, I have found that those times are when they broach the topic and then we have a conversation. So hopefully that helps. Question 2. I recently attended a week-long Boy Scout leadership camp. Part of the course was dividing us into 6-man patrols. We would do everything with the members of our patrol in order to build team building and, leadership. Overall, I got some really great people in my patrol. However, there was one individual who was seen as more of a burden rather than as an asset to the patrol. This person was slow, inefficient, which found my patrol and I always having to pick up some of his slack most of the time. The worst part was, no matter how many times he was criticized for his behavior, he never seemed to catch on and improve. Therefore, my question is this: how, as a leader, can you take someone on your team and change them from being a burden to an asset? Sorry for the long question. I just felt like there was a lot to cover. Thanks for your service and any time you spend with this email. Well, I hate to break it to you, but sometimes you cannot take somebody from being a burden and turn them into an asset. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't try, but to make that complete polar opposite shift, sometimes it is impossible. I'm sorry, people have a certain level of capacity and skills and intelligence and EQ and IQ and all of those things. And depending on what your job is, you may achieve a place where certain people are just unable to achieve the standard that is demanded. And that's one of the things that I looking back enjoy the most about the military and the community that I came from. That bar was very high. We had test gates along the way to weed out those individuals. But let me tell you this, guess what? On even the most high-performing team, all of those test gates being made, if you throw it onto a bell curve, you're going to have your top 10% and you're always going to have your bottom 10%. And what I found every time with that bottom 10%, on a really highly functioning team, there is always some level and essence of task sharing, meaning that the highest performers, not using the vast majority of their time and skill, but at least from a minimal perspective, they are load sharing with that bottom performer. Even in the most high performing teams that I ever worked with, there was always somebody who just wasn't as good at fill in the blank. And so everybody else picked up the slack. Now, it doesn't sound to me like that's the situation that you are describing, but just understand there's always going to be a bottom performer. So from a leadership perspective, perfection is not possible. Having everybody rise to exactly the same level is not possible. But that doesn't mean that you should ever stop trying to help people elevate themselves to continue to learn and explore and enhance their skill set, whatever it may be. Just realize you may encounter people, it's like, fuck, okay, you are not tooled correctly for this, and so you need to move on. Now, let's talk about things that you may potentially be able to do. The first thing I will say is, and perhaps this isn't how this played out, but this is how you wrote it. The worst part was no matter how many times he was criticized for his behavior, he never seemed to catch on and improved. What I would recommend is maybe don't start with criticism. Standards are beautiful things, but only if people understand what the standards are and what is expected of them. So you can criticize somebody until the cow comes home, or the cows come home. How does that saying go? I don't know. I've never had cows, but I think people get the point. If you start off with just criticism, a lot of times people are just going to turn you off, shut you out, and keep doing whatever it is that they're doing. They're not bought in at all. They don't understand what is expected of them. And quite frankly, depending on how it's delivered, even if it's delivered well, criticism can sting a little bit. So perhaps use that as your last-ditch effort and start with sitting this individual down after doing an evolution or two and explaining to them the impact on the team that their individual performance is having. Another thing that you could do is actually let this individual fail. We train to failure sometimes in the SEAL community, and it's not for the sake of failure. It can highlight a training deficiency. It could highlight a personnel deficiency, the combination of two or both of those things. But it's important to, if there is a weak link, to allow that weak link to become exposed, to allow it to fail in a controlled environment so it can become a learning point, much like I was talking about in the first question. You can use it to highlight, to train, to teach, and to improve your individuals and the team as a whole. So if there were time constraints on this and this individual was unwilling or unable to participate at a level that would allow your team to make that time constraint, on one of the evolutions, allow them to fail. Let your team fail and let that individual see the tangible impact on that team that their poor performance have. Now, some people may not pay attention to that because they really don't give a shit and they're self-absorbed, but I'm just saying it's an option. Another thing that you could do is put that individual that was the lowest performer, put them into a leadership position. Now, obviously, you're at a Boy Scout leadership camp. This is a great time I think you could do this, probably very low consequence. I don't imagine that you guys were getting shot at or at risk of life, limb, or eyesight. So it's a really good opportunity to maybe take that person who's not bought in, who really doesn't care about what it is that you guys are doing as a team, is not invested in working as hard as they can, and put them in charge. It really does change your headspace when you go from somebody who, in this situation, you're describing this person. To me, I would view this, or when I read this, I see it in my head as this person is sitting there just following directions and just kind of along for the ride. Well, when they get put in charge and they have to think proactively instead of reactively, and they're responsible for motivating other people or meeting the threshold or the standard and making sure that their team does that as well, it can really change their headspace. And it actually can, in my experience at least, it can change the amount of investment and energy that somebody is willing to input into the team environment. So is it a guarantee to work? It's absolutely not. Start, though, by just sitting down and having a conversation with this individual, because this situation, to some degree, is going to happen on every single team. That is just the way that it is when we're talking about human beings. Our abilities are so vastly different. Our strengths and weaknesses are so vastly different. And leadership, when it comes to achieving tasks as a team, if you don't know the task, if you don't know what's expected, if you don't explain to people the why and get buy-in from your subordinates, you're really going to struggle. So you might end up spending a little bit more time with this person. Maybe one of those 3 tools would work for you, but that's where I would start. And again, you're at a Boy Scout leadership camp, probably not a place where you can say, hey, dude, step into my office because you're fucking fired. Not a great place to do that, but maybe it would allow you as a leader to set a line in the sand and say, hey, you know what? In a different environment, this is where I would do that. And then just put that out of your head and do everything you can to work on trying to elevate another individual. That is how I would recommend you handle that. I understand it can be frustrating, but let's look at this in its totality. You're at a leadership camp where leadership lessons hopefully can be learned about not only yourself, but in the management and leadership of a team. So take advantage of that lower consequence, lower risk environment, and hopefully it would help you elsewhere. All right, question 3. Actually, 3 and 4 are exactly the same. I have been bombarded with questions about this, and I'm going to go ahead and answer it. But before I even get into this, spoiler alert, this is about the COVID vaccine and mandates from government and private businesses. Before I even get into this, I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to. I am not an expert in any way, shape, or form with anything to do with COVID. I'm not an expert in vaccines, and for clarity, I am not an anti-vaccine individual. I was vaccinated when I was young. I received I received vaccines when I was in the military. My children are vaccinated. I have no issue whatsoever with vaccines or the theory and concept of vaccines. Okay, let's get into this. Picked 2 of these because they're very similar, and I think this is something that is on a lot of people's minds. Email 1. I'm sure you've gotten some questions about this already, but I just received an email from my employer that a COVID vaccination will be required as part of its required reopening plan. I've already gotten both doses, and I'm not against the vaccine, but I think it crosses a big line when companies essentially issue ultimatums to employees regarding matters of their personal health. More than anything, I respect the decisions of informed citizens who can measure the risk-reward of getting vaccinated without the government or large corporations incessantly advocating for the vaccine. It seems that the implication is that if you don't get vaccinated, you are a big idiot, even though there are other things to consider such as demographics, pre-existing conditions, mortality rates, etc. Not trying to make this question political, as I am really sick of hearing about COVID and the political climate in general. I'm going to stop right here and say I could not agree with you more on both of those. I am exhausted by hearing about both of these, and it drives me nuts because what I'm just terrified of is we will get through this particular issue and then dive right into another election, a presidential election. I would like a break from a little bit of that. I digress. Moving on. What do you think of these mandates, and does this concern you at all? I am not going to quit my job on principle, but it definitely bothers me. So that was email number 1. Email number 2. My company just mandated vaccines for all employees. I have a young family and a high-paying job in investments for a charitable foundation. I was not planning to get a vaccine because I'm a healthy, active person who didn't need it. I want to have more kids, and I just don't fucking want it. I now need to choose to get a vaccine to keep my job or search for a new job that hopefully doesn't require a vaccine. I think a vaccine mandate is criminal. The government, companies, and the public who are pushing the vaccine so maniacally should be, and hopefully one day, be made to pay for this idiotic mania. When I read the news and see everything that is going on, I get really worried about the future of the country and my family's safety. I don't know what to do and would love to hear your thoughts. So I guess I'll go backwards. This is email number 4. So I'll talk to this one and then I'll go to the one previous, number 3. I don't know. Is mandating a vaccine criminal? I mean, I know that that's not what you're saying, and I know what you're saying is that you think that it is, you feel that it is criminal. I don't think it arises to the point of being criminal, But my own personal thoughts and sentiments on this, I'm actually going to go back to I'm going to combine these two emails now because I think this individual nailed it. I respect the decisions of informed citizens who can measure the risk-reward of getting vaccinated without the government or large corporations incessantly advocating for the vaccine. So I touched on briefly and was accidentally the presidential election. And I've talked about this previously with guests and my concern for the next election cycle. If we as a country cannot figure out a way to restore faith in the election cycle, the election model that we use, I don't know if we could go through another election cycle like we did in 2020. If that were to get an order of magnitude worse, where both sides are saying that the election was stolen and the people who are voting have no real way to determine the authenticity of the result, I mean, I think our country would survive, but that's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. Like, holy shit, we might just actually implode because nobody knows whether or not the information that they are getting is the truth. And obviously this question is about COVID, but I bring up the previous election cycle and restoring faith in the process because I think that's one of the biggest things that people are struggling with when it comes to COVID, and to include myself to a degree. The back and forth of information, and I don't mean just necessarily from, Dr. Fauci, right? When it comes to masks, people can think whatever they want about whoever they want to. I'm talking about the guidance that has been given by Dr. Fauci. And I will compare that to the guidance that has been given at a state level in Montana, and then a local level in the city. And then in talking with other doctors throughout just my daily life and people that I train jiu-jitsu with. And then, don't recommend this, but, going online and navigating that fucking minefield and, interacting and discussing with people their thoughts. The amount of deviation in the information that is being provided, it is absolutely no surprise to me that people are essentially distrustful of any information coming their way. And I don't actually think that that's a bad thing. I do believe, and I kind of operate under the principle as a person, that you should question everything. There's a reason why people say things like, hey, maybe you should get a second opinion from a very educated individual on this subject matter that you go see a doctor and you get a diagnosis that's not great. Well, go get a second opinion to make sure two people are viewing it, maybe from a different angle, come up to the same answer. Point in saying all of that is I do believe in being skeptical as a person, not to the point of being paranoid or a conspiracy theorist. That's a conversation completely down a different rabbit hole. But I think it's natural that people should be able to question things. But when they do, or when guidance shifts back and forth, and let's tie this back into the leadership question that I just answered. Probably the worst thing that you could do to your subordinates that are working for you is change the guidance that you are giving them every 30 seconds. It's going to create confusion. It's going to sow distrust. It's going to do anything other than what you want it to do. It's going to erode the capability of that team. I, as an individual, absolutely respect the decision of informed citizens. I couldn't have said it better. The risk versus reward of getting vaccinated. To me, it makes me uncomfortable that the organizations that have created this vaccine for a profit, and I have no issue with profit whatsoever, but let's be very clear, these vaccines are being sold, and the organizations that have created them have been indemnified against essentially everything that happens after they are being provided to the public. I am not a fan of that. Another thing that I think is important that we should be discussing that I don't hear being discussed very much is the delivery method of the vaccine, the mRNA, I believe it is called. And it's the first time, the research that I've seen on this and the conversations I've had, this is the first time in the history of the human species that we have used this delivery mechanism on other human beings. And I'm not against that, but it's something that I think we should have a discussion around. There's some level of risk versus reward that I don't know if it would ever change my mind to say, hey, yes, you should be mandated to get this. But I do think that comparing COVID-19 to things like smallpox and polio, both of which I am vaccinated against. I got smallpox when I was in the military, and the polio vaccine before starting school when I was younger. They're not the same thing. The mortality rate is not the same thing. They're actually completely different. But I very often see people combining all of these things. And if you say, hey, I respect people's ability to make a decision based off the own situation that they are in, and their age, their health, the demographic, all of the things that were listed out in this email, it's almost as if you say that, people will lump in and say, well, you're just an anti-vaccine person. And that is very intellectually disingenuous to me. I understand people being hesitant and uncertain and worried. I felt exactly the same way when COVID was kind of going into orbit early last year, when, I mean, there were empty streets in Kalispell. Like, legitimately, you could have walked down the center of the road because people were quarantined, people were scared. The data that we were looking at then was insane. And I understand those feelings, but I don't think that, at least, a private organization, if you work for a private company, it's my understanding that a private company can mandate whatever that private company wants. Do I think it's right for them to mandate a vaccine? No, I don't personally think it's right for them to mandate a vaccine, but private businesses can do what private businesses want to do. A government mandate, so for me, I work for myself. So the mandate to get a vaccine, when people are talking about this, I can understand the conversation, but it doesn't hit home for me because I work for myself. That doesn't mean I don't think about this, because one place where I could see this also moving over to would be air travel. Perhaps the government is going to put it into place where you have to be a mandate for a vaccine for you to be able to travel on domestic carriers. And that is something that I do for work, and oftentimes I'll do that for personal activities. And I've thought about this. I am not vaccinated against COVID. I had COVID in November. And I've said this before, my own experience, I take it as that. Everybody's experience is going to be different with it. But for myself, personally, I would rather have COVID again and allow my body to work through that and accepting the risk and consequence of that decision than get a vaccine that is less than 1 year old. And I'm not saying that that position is correct. I'm not saying it is elevated against somebody else's position. What I'm saying is that is how I feel about it. So if they made a mandate for air travel, what I would do is not travel on the air. I would, and like I said, I've already thought about this, because when I hear people talking about the ultimatums that they're getting from their employers, it's tough for me to wrap my head around. So I was trying to view this through the lens of something that could have a drastic impact on my life. And so I viewed it through air travel. And what I would do is, or not what I would do, the choice that I would be given would be very similar to, obviously not in the regards of losing your job, but it's either do this or this is no longer available to you. I'm going to take, in that situation, the no longer available to me. Because I've weighed the risk versus reward for myself. From my social circle perspective, I do not, in my social circle, interface with people who are in a high risk category. And again, of all of, of a lot of the things in my personal life, if they changed, my opinion may change on it as well. But I can only speak about where I am and where I think I'm going to be in the future. So I'm not around a high risk community. I'm actually around an extremely low risk community that put an emphasis on personal health, personal responsibility, personal preparation. If you look at the raw math on the impact of COVID for that, it's extremely low. I don't think vaccines are unsafe. I've heard great things about the COVID vaccines. I've also heard horrendous things about some of the side effects for the COVID vaccine. For myself, what I would want, what I do want, and what I'm going to wait for is a little bit more time, because I am not currently in a high-risk situation. If I was in a high-risk situation, let's say I added 40 years to my life, I probably would have a different opinion about this. I might not, though. I might just completely self-isolate and control what I can, which is myself, and go through all of the mechanisms that are currently available in our delivery app delivery world and have things brought to me and put myself into an environment, or the people that I love the most into an environment where, again, we're taking responsibility for ourselves. We're weighing the risk and reward. I have seen all over social media, every aspect of every aspect of the internet. Hey, you're not getting vaccinated. Well, you don't care about anybody else. You are an idiot. And those are actually the most polite way to say those things. I don't think that way at all. And I think that saying those things, to me, it shows a lack of, what would be the best way to put this? What it shows is emotions leading instead of logic. We as a country and as the world are not going to be destroyed by COVID-19. And to go back to the faith in establishments providing information, my bigger concern about what is going on around COVID ties back into people losing faith in the organizations that I would hope they have faith in. So COVID-19, I'm sorry, is not going to wipe out the population. Something in the near future, maybe, or near future meaning being now to whenever, 20 years from now, there may well be something that could, in fact, wipe the human race off the face of the planet. And those same organizations that people are losing faith in right now are probably going to start ringing the alarm bells. I would hope so. I think that's what they're designed and dedicated to do. But because the faith has been lost in those organizations, nobody's going to listen. And then we're proper fucked. So I worry more about that than the actual impact of COVID itself. To me, like I said, because of where I am at in my life, I view it from a much larger issue of the breakdown of trust and communication. That's what worries me more. The mandates, I mean, these decisions are going to be very difficult for people. Again, private organizations, from my understanding, they can mandate a lot of things. I don't know what rises to the level of them not being able to, or what would be criminal, or what you could push back against as a union. I don't live in that world, and I don't know. But life is about the choices that you make. If you are presented with the opportunity, or not the opportunity, if you are presented with that mandate and it is something that you are unwilling to deviate from, then that is your choice to make. And the choices that you make will come with consequences, and you'll have to deal with those consequences. And the one thing that in here that I do think should be touched on, the government and companies and the public who are pushing the vaccine so maniacally, hopefully one day should be made to pay for this idiotic mania. I don't think that the mania is necessarily idiotic. I think that it is emotion-driven and not logic-driven. What I would like to see, and what I would hope at some point, is as more information comes out, that those who took the opportunity to seize on the current environment that we are in and leverage it for personal gain are held accountable. And I am not saying, and I'm going to leave it at that, because I think time will tell whether or not that did happen or it didn't. And if it did happen, I think an example should be made out of those people. At the end of the day, I think people are doing the best that they can. I think people are scared out of their minds, and I think most people, especially the ones who are screaming the loudest, are the ones who probably have been pushed the least in their life, challenged the least in their life, smashed with stress the least in their life. I get it. That's their natural, that is their reaction to being pushed like that. It's not mine. But I'm not gonna necessarily hold any judgment against them, but I'm also probably not going to listen to what they say with any high level of authority. Because, as I've said in previous questions, I think you should be able to ask why. I think you should be able to challenge. I think you should be able to assess your own risk versus reward, and you should be able to make your own decisions without judgment or public flagellation, like you don't care about me or anybody else. I think that is so intellectually dishonest, and I wish it would stop. And like I said, my bigger fear is the degradation of trust and integrity in these organizations. So when something does come out that threatens to end our species, nobody's paying attention. And I don't know how to recover it. Just like I really don't know how to recover the integrity or the perceived integrity of the election cycle, but we need to figure it out. Thankfully, there are smarter people than myself. Hint, hint, everybody on this fucking planet is nearly smarter than I am. So I hope that there are people out there working on it. And when they are, and when they come up with solutions, I hope we're not at a place where people now are just completely blindly disregarding and ignoring everything because they've been bombarded with this madness. I hope that cleared up in some way, shape, or form, both those emails. Last one. Let's end on something a little bit lighter. I don't even know how long I've been talking. Quite possibly the dumbest question you've ever received, but I'm very curious. Going through Hell Week as a SEAL, it's, well, hold on. I have to stop you here. Going through Hell Week as a SEAL. You are not a SEAL as you were going through Hell Week. So BUDS is 6 months long. Hell Week, when I went through, is the 5th week of training in the first phase. At the end of BUDS, you're still not a SEAL. You have to go to additional training. Now they call it what is it? What the hell did I go through? I went through STT. I believe they call it SQT now, SEAL Qualification Training. At the end of that, you get your trident and become a SEAL. So going through Hell Week, it sounds like you're on your feet and doing something strenuous every minute of the week. Largely accurate. You are sitting down when you eat meals or paddling the boats. What happened if you needed to use the bathroom? Like really badly. I can't imagine the instructors would just let you stop and leave. I'm not going to call this a dumb question. I actually get this one quite a bit. So 2 scenarios here. We have a number 1 and we have a number 2. If you need to go number 1, you go number 1. If you are sitting in the chow hall eating lunch, you're probably not going to do that in the chow hall because it's going to make a noise that is very indicative of somebody going number 1, and you're going to get hammered, and your entire boat crew is. So they have porta potties or bathrooms that you can just run to and go pee-pee. Other than sitting in the chow hall, if you're running along, you're paddling the boats, you're laying in the surf, you're crawling around in the sand, running around with telephone poles over your head, if you need to take a piss, you take a piss. Now let's talk about the number 2, which a lot of people think would potentially be more complicated than the number 1. And all I will leave you with is one of the most amazing things that I've ever seen. And that is a man who in BUDS took a shit while running on a 4-mile time run, broke stride only one time to shake out his leg to get the aforementioned material to eject from his pants, and continued on the run. If you are away from a facility that has bathrooms while you are in Hell Week and you need to go to the bathroom, you are going into the ocean and you're going to take a shit in the ocean. And that's just the way that is. Again, at the chow hall, you'd have those porta potties or the bathrooms there. If you're over at the pool, there's a lot of evolutions that occur in the pool. There are bathrooms there. You're not allowed to shit in the pool. It's one of the most disgusting things that I have ever seen, and I've seen it far too many times. Jason Tushin, a guest that I had, guy that I served with, described it the best that I've ever heard. He called it inking, which is exactly what it looks like. It is disgusting because they get to leave the water and the instructors are often stuck in there. But yeah, so you do your business whenever your body will allow you to do your business. And if you can take a shit while you are at full stride running, well, there you go. It's only downhill for you for the rest of your life. So hopefully that helped answer that question. That is all I have for this Friday. See you all on Monday. Goodbye.
On the west bank of the river.
That big firm, west bank, it gives me hell. Still give it to me in the grove.
Okay, 1's in from the north. I've got the west bank of the river. 2's going to give it to you in the grove.
Roger, give me that gun run. Right along that bag, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to tune in, whether you're listening on an audio-only platform or you're watching on YouTube. I appreciate that you take the time every week to tune in. People ask me a lot, what can they do to help me spread the word? And the answer is actually embedded in the question. The biggest thing you guys can do to help me, if you enjoy the podcast and you think it would be helpful to others, is subscribe and share it with other people. And if you have the time, go on to Apple Podcasts and leave me a rating and a review. If you think the podcast sucks, tell me it sucks and leave a 0-star review or the lowest stars possible. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion, you can go to clearedhotpodcast.com and there is a contact me button right there, which will land in my inbox. And the last thing, if people are interested in helping out, what you can do is fly the old flag. And by that, I don't mean an actual flag because I don't have any of those. I'm talking about t-shirts or sweatshirts or hats, whatever it may be. Again, clearedhotpodcast.com. Click on the shop tab and hopefully something in there looks like it would be an item you would like to wear around town. And then you can tell people what it is when they ask you. But that is it. The biggest thing I can say is thank you. I truly appreciate it. And until next time, see you.